All right, we're going to get started. Thanks again for joining us tonight. Again, the topic is flying with ForeFlight. We're going to cover some real world scenarios for flying with this popular aviation app. My name is John Zimmerman. I work there at Sporty's, best place in the world to work, right on the airport in Batavia, Ohio. I'm a vice president at Sporty's Pilot Shop, work on a lot of the iPad product development, which is fun. Also, an active GA pilot, most importantly. So I'm out there flying with this stuff. Fly a variety of airplanes and helicopters, and every bit of it's fun. And I've been flying with the iPad now really since it came out about 4 years ago. Also, do a website called iPad Pilot News that I'll tell you a little bit more about in just a minute here. Some quick housekeeping here. First, this webinar is being recorded. So if you miss anything tonight or feel like something wasn't clear and you wanted to go back and review it again, feel free to do that. We'll have a recording, video recording up in a couple of days. You can see that at sporties.com/webinars and also a good video to share with friends if they couldn't make it here with us tonight. So if you missed something, don't worry, we'll come back and get it. Also, feel free to ask any questions. There's a questions panel over on the right side of your webinar software there. Feel free to ask questions. We'll try to answer a few of those towards the end of the evening tonight. On screen, you see a quick preview of what we're going to cover tonight. Really pretty simple. I'm going to start out with a couple of ForeFlight basics for you, give you just some of the essential techniques to know so that you can operate this system. We're going to go through a VFR scenario, a real-world scenario, show you how everything works in the app itself. Then going to go through an IFR scenario, showing you maybe a couple different features that would be particularly interesting for an IFR pilot, and then offer some closing thoughts for you. So it doesn't look like much, but I think you'll find we cover a lot of ground tonight throughout these scenarios. One other note: we are going to be hands-on tonight, as I mentioned. Going to be doing some live demos here, actually in the iPad simulator, not on an actual iPad, but be very, very close to the same thing. So if you have your iPad with you, feel free to pull that out and fire up ForeFlight and follow along. There'll be plenty of options here for you to do what I'm doing on the screen. Do it yourself on your iPad. So feel free to get that iPad, fire up ForeFlight, and get ready. Quick plug here. Obviously, in a half hour or an hour tonight, we can't possibly cover everything that is in ForeFlight. It's an incredibly powerful app. So we do offer at Sporty's a training course on ForeFlight called Flying with ForeFlight. It's over an hour video, has some reference materials, review quiz, iPad checklist for pilots. Lots of good information there. It's available as an online course or an iPad app for $29.99. So if you really want to dive in even deeper than we go tonight, I encourage you to check out that course. It includes really everything you need to know about ForeFlight. Also, maybe even before then, if you just want some generic iPad information, that's the website I mentioned, iPad Pilot News. It's a free website we offer. It's informational in nature, lots of tips and tricks on general iPad things, on apps, on accessories. We have videos there. There'll be a recording of this webinar up there. So a great resource for any pilot flying with the iPad. It's done by pilots flying with the iPad just like you. So try to cut through the jargon. And again, that's free. There's also an email newsletter you can sign up for there. Okay, enough sales pitch for you. Let's get into the heart of this. Just to get started, though, wanted to do a quick poll and see where everybody is in terms of ForeFlight. So on screen there, you should see three quick options. If you can vote, how comfortable do you feel with ForeFlight right now? Are you just getting started and finding your way? Are you pretty good, but think you still have some to learn, or are you a real pro and you're using it all the time? Give you just a couple minutes here and let those votes come in. Well, it looks like about 60% of you are just starting out, which is good. Another 40% or so, pretty good but don't know it all, and just a couple of pros, which is good. So the few pros that are out there, try hard not to try to go easy on me tonight. All right, let's start with some basics. Before we get into the scenarios we're going to talk about, I think it's important just to have a couple of core skills with ForeFlight, just so you know how to do the basics and a couple of tips here. So we'll run through a couple of those, then we'll dive into the scenarios. Real quick one that we always like to cover. Some people get hung up on this. Is it even legal? Is this just a toy, or can this really be a replacement for my paper charts? The quick answer is yes, it's absolutely legal. Certainly, if you're a Part 91 private pilot, like most of us, I suspect, the answer is absolutely yes. FAR 91.21 and Advisory Circular 9121 1B are the chapter and verse you can quote. Advisory Circular 9178 goes into a little more detail about the iPad as a Class 1 electronic flight bag. All of that, interesting reading, I suppose, if you want. The takeaway is the iPad is absolutely legal as long as you have your charts up to date, and they're the functional equivalent of paper, which they are in ForeFlight. So don't get bogged down in this. It's easy to do that. But the short answer is yes, it's absolutely legal. Even if you're not Part 91, maybe you're a Part 135 charter operator or even a Part 121 airline, the answer is it's still legal. It just requires some more paperwork. So that is all we'll say about legal tonight, but just want to cover that so everybody knows that nothing to worry about there. Real quickly as we get started, if you don't have the ForeFlight app yet, you should know it's free to download and try for about 30 days. Encourage you to do that. And then there are two subscription options. So once you actually want to purchase the app and start using it, you'll have two options there. First is standard at $74.99 a year. This includes really everything you need for flying, all your VFR and IFR charts, coverage across the entire country, full airport information, all your pre-flight planning, flight plan filing, weather briefings, all that. Complete in-flight moving maps, all your navigation. That's also compatible with the Stratus ADS-B receiver, which gives you in-flight weather, traffic, and attitude. So as you can see, it's really not a light package at all. The standard package is quite good. The Pro package at $149.99 does offer a little bit more. It gives you those geo-referenced approach plates, which really just means your airplane is shown flying down the approach plate. Also offers this plates on maps feature, which I'll show you. You can overlay an approach plate on a sectional chart. Hazard Advisor, which gives you a terrain warning. Profile View, which is another terrain feature. Plate Annotations, which lets you write on the instrument approach plate, and some higher end document syncing. So some nice features there for sure. Is Pro a must-have? Probably not, but there are some nice features there, especially as you look at things like Hazard Advisor, Profile View, things like that. I think you'll find they're pretty interesting. When we open up ForeFlight, which we'll do here in just a minute, the bottom of the screen will always have this tab bar, and this is really how you navigate through the app. So for you beginners out there, you want to become well acquainted with this, become very comfortable here. These 8 main tabs are really how you navigate through the app: airports, maps, plates, documents, imagery, file and brief, scratch pad, and more. We'll really talk about all these tabs tonight, but get to know what those mean and which ones you use most often. You'll find it very helpful. All right, here's a quick tip. Some of you may have seen this. I know I certainly did when I first started flying with ForeFlight, and it's still a question we hear a fair amount. I'm sitting in the FBO or at home, and I'm connected to Wi-Fi, and I'm looking at all my charts, and they're all there, and they look great. I go get in the airplane, and I'm away from that Wi-Fi connection, and I pull up my chart, and it's gone. What the heck happened to my chart? You get this screen on there, no charts, and you get this warning. Well, what happened is while you were connected to the internet, ForeFlight was what you might call streaming those charts. It was downloading those charts on the fly from the internet and displaying them, but they weren't really stored permanently for offline use. So when you go get in the cockpit and you don't have an internet connection, you no longer have those charts accessible. So what you want to do is go in and actually download those charts to your iPad. And let's dive into the app here, and I'll show you exactly how that works. So 1 second here as I pull that up. All right, so we're into the app here again. I'm using the simulator here, but should be very similar experience. And I even have my finger here to help you follow along. So if we open up the app and we go into the More tab on the bottom right-hand corner here, the first option you'll see on the left side is Downloads. And this is where you go to download all your charts so that they're permanently saved in the app for in-flight use. Pretty easy to set up. Once you do it the first time, you can do this in just a couple minutes. But to walk you through it real quick, the top few lines here are download settings. So if we want to set up our United States downloads, we tap on United States. At the top of the page, we select which charts we want. So if we're a VFR pilot, we can deselect these IFR charts. If we're not interested in VFR charts, we can turn those off. So turn on these buttons as you like for coverage. And then down below it, what you'll see is this list of states. And here's where you select what coverage you need. And some people are tempted to dive in here and download the entire United States. And that's really a bad idea unless you're flying a jet cross country regularly. It's a good idea to download really the states you need, maybe a little bit of buffer. So go in here and simply tap on a line to select a chart to download. Once we have our states coverage, we can tap downloads to go back. You'll see this easy to use green download button appear below. Simply tap that, walk away, and ForeFlight will be downloading all of your charts. It's really simple, it's really easy, it makes updates easy, but this is what you want to do to make sure charts are stored permanently on your iPad. This is also where you would go to update your charts. So every 28 days when new charts come out, you'll come here. ForeFlight will tell you that there are new charts. Come in here, hit download, and walk away. Very, very simple. The only tip I'll share with you here is, like me, I've got Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana downloaded because those are the areas around me where I fly most often. Well, if I'm going on a trip to Florida, I need to remember the night before or a couple days before to come in here and change my state coverage area up here at the top. Otherwise, when I blast off, I will not have those charts. So just be aware before every trip. Think about, do I have the right databases downloaded in ForeFlight? All right, another quick tip while we're here in the More tab that I recommend people do is the aircraft. And this is where you can set up an aircraft profile. It takes just a second. Tap the plus button at the top right there, and you can enter the tail number, all your equipment. This doesn't take long at all, but it'll come into play for both flight plan filing and also for creating routes and doing performance calculations in the app. So I really recommend it. If you fly multiple airplanes, you can create multiple profiles here. It's very easy, but take just a couple of seconds, go into aircraft here and set up your fuel burn, your true airspeed, all that kind of thing. Get out of that. All right, on the maps page, which we'll come back to and talk about some more in a little bit, but there's some key features here. You'll spend a lot of time on the maps page. The first concept is zooming, and most of us know this. If you use the iPad at all, you know that you pinch to zoom and zoom in and out with your fingers. Hard to show here with this finger, but if I zoom in and out like that, it's the easiest way to navigate the iPad. It's particularly good on charts. So you should know that if you're using the iPad, but pinch zoom does work. It works very, very well here. ForeFlight will zoom in and out and will scale the chart. So should be in your arsenal. One more tool along those lines is touch planning, what ForeFlight calls it. Just the idea that really you can do everything on the map with your fingers. So if you want to know, hey, what's under my finger right here? Just tap. It'll tell you airports, nav aids, waypoints that are under your finger there. Likewise, if I want to go to the West Coast and see what's there, just tap and drag your finger, and you can go anywhere you want on the map. So this is what ForeFlight calls touch planning. It's very intuitive. If you use the iPad at all, you know how this works and you know what to expect. But that's really just the best way to navigate around the app. All right, given those kind of core tools now, let's dive into some scenarios and let's talk about actually using this app and putting it to work. First, we'll start with a VFR scenario. And one good way to work this app is to really look at these tabs at the bottom and work left to right. You don't have to do them in order. Don't think of them as a checklist you have to do, but as a way of kind of organizing your thoughts, it's actually a pretty good start. So let's go to airports in the far left and let's start there. Let's imagine we're planning a flight from I-69, Claremont County Airport, where Sporty's is, up to Oshkosh for the big show. So first thing we want to do is probably look at our destination airport, learn a little bit about it, learn the runways, the weather, the frequencies, all that. So that's where we go to airports. A good thing to do to find an airport, first of all, type it in the top right search box. You'll see this search box on a number of pages. Google has us all trained that this is how you find things, and ForeFlight really operates the same way. So just search for an airport up there. It'll pull up in the main view here. If you're going to use the airport a lot, or if you're planning a trip there, tap this star button at the top. That will make it a favorite. You see it appear on the left side here. That just makes it easy to go back and forth. So here I have my departure and my destination as favorites. I can switch back and forth between them very quickly without having to go up here and search. So I've selected my destination airport here. I've made it a favorite for quick reference. And I'm going to go in here and look at just all the different information here. You can see another row of tabs across the middle here. So frequencies shows me all my frequencies for communication. Weather will show me the METAR, TAF, and winds aloft at the airport. The handy thing here, it shows you the raw code and then also translates it for you. It'll also show you nearby weather, so you can get a real good at-a-glance look at what the weather's like around there. So if I'm briefing a VFR flight, I certainly want to start with this. And good news, the weather at Oshkosh looks spectacular today. And the weather at their surrounding airports also looks quite good. I can also look at runway information, the different ones, how long they are. ForeFlight has a really handy feature here where if it's connected to the internet, it will pull down the wind information and tell me my crosswind and headwind or tailwind component for each runway. So makes it really easy to decide what's the best runway because I don't have to do that math in my head. I know I've got a 7-knot crosswind on this one, an 8-knot crosswind there, a 5-knot crosswind here, and a 2-knot crosswind on 1836. So that's going to be my best option. Procedures we won't talk about a whole lot here because that's really more for an IFR pilot. That'll be your approach plates. The one thing I will point out is airport diagrams. So airport diagrams are very, very helpful, especially at a busy airport, whether you're VFR or IFR. I will show you some ways you can use it actually in flight taxiing around, but even for pre-flight, they're very handy. ForeFlight actually offers up to 3 different types of airport diagrams. There's not necessarily 3 for every airport, but Oshkosh is an example where there is one. We can see the little preview thumbnail here at the top. If I tap on that, I'll get a nice pop-up that shows the outlines, and importantly, it'll show me where the FBOs are. If I'm down here in procedures, I can tap on airport diagram. And if the FAA publishes an airport diagram for that airport, it'll bring it up. So these are usually larger airports served by instrument approaches. And this is sort of your traditional, if you're an instrument pilot, you recognize the traditional approach plate style. I can tap close and go back to my airports. Recently, something that ForeFlight has added is what's called a ForeFlight diagram, and you see that below airport diagram. It's the same thing except ForeFlight's actually creating these charts, not the FAA. And one of the things you'll notice, in my opinion, while it doesn't have all the frequency information of the FAA chart, it's actually much more detailed when it comes to ground features. So you can see here at Oshkosh, you can actually see the show hangars for AirVenture. You can see the grass runway at Pioneer Airport. You can see a lot more buildings and details. So they've really done a nice job. They're adding, I think they've added over 400 of these already. They're adding more and more every month. So a really nice feature. But if you see that ForeFlight diagram, that's what it is. It's just in addition to a regular airport diagram. Other things self-explanatory here in the airports tab, NOTAMs. You can read services, including restaurants, car rental. One I like to point out here is the airport facility directory, the AFD tab. And most people may think that with the iPad, what in the world would I need the AFD for? But there's actually a couple pieces of information that only appear in the AFD. Things like pilot controlled lighting and some interesting airport remarks in here. So if you're going to a new airport, I'd recommend you pull up that AFD tab and take a look at just real quick what it says. In particular, pay attention to those airport remarks. Sometimes you can find a couple things there hiding, like closed at night. You may not know it unless you look there. So that's our airports page. Again, a lot of information there. Get us familiar with the airport we're going to, and a great place to start any trip. Next, we'll go to the maps page. This is the page you'll use most often, I think. You use it both pre-flight and in-flight. We'll talk about both of those uses here. And let's start out here with planning a flight. There are many, many ways to plan a flight. The easiest one is that search box I mentioned. Just like on the airports page, we have a search box on the maps page. ForeFlight gives you a suggestion of how it works, and it's just like you would think. It's pretty much like an old school flight plan form. So if I wanted to go from I-69 to Oshkosh, I would type in I-69 space KOSH and then search. ForeFlight will draw that route on the map, connect the 2 points. Pretty simple. Nothing to it. Now, if I want to add to it, right now I've just got a basic world map. This is when we get into layers. So on the maps page at the top left, you'll see this drop down menu. This layers box is really how you customize your view. The left side, think of these as base maps. These are charts or maps I can view. And then on the right are things I can overlay on top of them. So let's take this example. I want to look at a sectional. I can turn on sectionals, and that's my base map. And I also want to look at radar, see if there's any rain out there, just a little bit. And let's look at TFRs. I don't want to fly through one of those. And I can even turn on, let's say, flight rules. So you see on the left side, I can pick one, but on the right side, I can pick numerous from these different boxes. That's the concept of layers. That's really how ForeFlight works, and you'll spend a lot of time with those. Something you may have noticed here when I turned on my layers is that I'm flying right across Lake Michigan. Well, in my Cessna 172, that's not a great idea. And in fact, there's also a TFR in Chicago for President Obama visiting there. Well, let's find out about that. This is where touch planning comes into play. I can simply tap on that TFR and it will tell me the information about it. If I do it correctly here, it will tell me everything I want to know about that TFR, which I can't seem to do correctly. But it'll tell me what I need to know about that TFR, including effective times. It'll also tell me the altitudes, which is very, very helpful. So again, use touch planning. Here's another case of touch planning where I don't want to go across that lake in my 172, and I've got a TFR here. You can use something called rubber band flight planning. This is a great technique. Simply tap and hold your course line. You'll see that circle appear around your finger. I can then drag my course line so it's away from Lake Michigan and it's away from the TFR. Release. ForeFlight will tell me everything that's under that point: airports, nav aids, waypoints. So in this case, I'm going to pick a nearby airport. And here, instead of guessing if I'm going to miss the TFR, I can just change my flight plan. And I know visually that I'm going to miss the TFR by a nice margin here. So it's a great technique for VFR and IFR pilots, planning your way around something. Just tap and grab your course line, drag it over to where you want to go, and let go. Much easier than trying to guess a heading. All right, so we've got an initial idea of our route. We can look at kind of airspaces as we zoom in here. We can find out about our route. After reviewing that, the next stop I'd suggest is imagery. We're going to skip plates because that's really just instrument approach plates. We'll hit that for the IFR pilots. Documents, again, that's more of a pre-flight reference thing. We'll talk about that later. But if I'm planning a VFR flight, I've got an idea of my airport now, my destination. I've got an idea of my route, the weather and airspace involved. And now I can go to imagery. So this isn't going to overlay radar on the map the way Maps is, but it's a great spot to find pre-flight weather information. So I can come down here and look at static Doppler radar and look at the next red image for my route of flight, for example. I can also look at some great things like turbulence and icing forecasts. So if I was IFR, I could come in here and see if there's any icing to be concerned about. I can look at airmets and sigmets. Where are the airmets out there today? Where are the forecast airmets and sigmets? So imagery is really a tab you're going to spend time on pre-flight. It's not something that works in flight, but for pre-flight, it's a great place to get a view. This is also the place to find prognostic charts, which I used a lot. If you're looking for those forecast charts, this is where you'll find them in ForeFlight. All right, so now we've got a lot of information about our flight. We're really ready to get a formal briefing and file our VFR flight plan. That's where the file and brief tab comes into play, as it would suggest. So I can just come in here, tap new flight plan, fill out a traditional flight plan form here, my route and everything. I can then select one of two things: brief, which will get me an FAA weather briefing, or file. By default, this goes through Lockheed Martin's flight service, which is really a nice feature. Lockheed Martin actually has some pretty neat new technology there. So ForeFlight is filing their flight plans direct through them and getting you an official weather briefing. You don't have to have an account there necessarily. ForeFlight will use their own if you don't. So it's a really easy way to get a briefing and file your VFR flight plan here. All right, so let's go flying. We've got our flight plan filed. We've got a good weather briefing with the imagery tab, and we know where we're headed. This is where we go back to the maps page. Again, this is the page you're going to use in flight. You can use this most often. After takeoff, I like to turn on a few features on my on my iPad and on ForeFlight here. So the first thing, we'll go up to the top and you see this row of buttons here. This little looks like a speedometer. That's going to turn up the HUD, the heads up display. It's a series of data fields across the bottom of the app that's really, really helpful. Just basic data you want to know. Driven by GPS. So I have my time en route here, ground speed, track, all the things that are helpful. I'd really leave that on all the time. It's a handy feature. The thing that some pilots may not know is that these are customizable. So let's say GPS altitude doesn't interest me much. I can tap on that and choose from a number of other options here um, for the HUD. Something that is particularly interesting that's been added recently is you can even show a nearest airport in here from ForeFlight. So it's not visual necessarily, but a good last worst case scenario if you had to have it. So selectable, tap the field you want to change. If you want to change it, just tap on the new field and it's done. So that's the HUD. The other thing is the nav log. And if we go up here and tap on this 3 dash line button, that'll bring down this box with the nav log. And this is really great in flight. This is sort of like a flight plan form in route. So I've got my 2 legs of my flight here, and ForeFlight tells me both legs, my leg from Claremont County to that intermediate airport we use to avoid the TFR, and then from there on to my destination. It's telling me my course, my distance, my gallons burned based on the airport or aircraft that's stored, all kinds of helpful information. If I'm connected to the internet here, it'll even tell me my winds aloft, including my winds aloft. It'll give me my time en route. So I like to fly with this setup. My moving map in the middle, my nav log at the top, my HUD at the bottom. Very, very handy. Now, the other thing you can do is turn on track up. Now we're in simulator mode here, so our airplane's going to be down in Georgia. But if I go in here and tap this settings menu, you'll see auto center mode here. And there's 3 options: north up, track up centered where the aircraft is in the middle of the screen, or track up forward where the aircraft is at the bottom of the screen. I'm going to tap on track up forward because I want to fly in track up. I'm not going to try to convince you of track up or north up. That's kind of a Coke or Pepsi thing, and whichever one you like, fly with it that way. If you're a track up person though, this is how you would set that up. What you'll notice though is I selected track up, but the map hasn't changed yet. And this is a big gotcha that a lot of people get confused with. It's not enough to select that. You also have to, what's it say after all? It says auto center mode, track up forward. Are we in auto center mode? Well, we're not, because that's what this little crosshair is at the top right. When we tap that button, it means ForeFlight is going to keep the map centered on our aircraft and is going to keep the map centered there as we fly. So this would be your traditional in-flight moving map display. You would tap that, keep that highlighted so the map is always moving with your airplane. But the important point for track up pilots is if that auto center mode is not on, it doesn't matter what you select up here from this menu, you are not going to be track up. So this is a good setup here en route. Again, if you track up, I've got track up set, I've got my HUD, I've got my nav log. One other thing I'd point out here that I think is helpful for VFR pilots is obstacles. Sometimes we're down low and we're enjoying the beautiful weather on a Sunday afternoon maybe, and towers can ruin our whole day. Well, ForeFlight has an obstacles layer here. If you turn that on, it will automatically put towers on the map. You can see them here. In fact, if I go to a world map view, they're a little clearer even. It automatically declutters these, so as I zoom out, it'll declutter to the tallest ones. These should be familiar symbols. These are the same symbols you find on a sectional chart. And just like almost everything in ForeFlight, if I tap on an obstacle, I get more information. That's really the way it works in ForeFlight. Tap on an airport, get more information. Tap on airspace, get more information. Tap on an obstacle. So here it's telling me that that tower is 1,061 feet MSL, or 673 feet above ground level, and it's got a red light on it. So this is a really handy thing if you're flying low. Certainly up high, this can be kind of a distraction and you might want to turn it off. But down low, it's definitely something I think you should consider. One other interesting terrain feature, and again, this is a pro feature as I mentioned earlier, is profile. So I've got my drop-down box here, and I'm on Navlog, but I can also switch to profile. And if I do that, that's going to show a side view, a profile view of all the terrain and obstacles. You see those green spots are obstacles there. And in fact, if I put in a route here just real quick, let's put in Atlanta, Georgia to San Francisco. We should cross some mountains as a part of that. If I put that in, you'll notice I can have this profile view centered on the aircraft, which we have now, and it's going out to about 50 miles of my aircraft. Or I can tap on route, and it will show me the entire route. And here's where you see the Rocky Mountains come into play, because this is showing the terrain view all the way from my departure in Atlanta all the way out to San Francisco, my destination. It's showing me my highest, my clearance. My first strike is 1,000 miles away. That's where this red part is. So just another great terrain obstacle view. If you're flying in mountainous terrain or if obstacles are an issue, I'd encourage you to use both the obstacle overlay as a layer and the profile view as a feature for terrain. Okay, we'll go back to Navlog, and let's get back on our trip from I-69 to Oshkosh, and we'll pretend that we're getting close to our destination there, and we're VFR. And one of the things that is actually confusing for a number of people is entering the pattern. So I'll tap this little route button down here that will automatically zoom to my route, and I'm gonna go back to north up mode here. So here's my destination, but how do I find the runway? Sounds like a silly thing, but a lot of people, it's not easy. Well, there's a couple different options here I'll show. One is the extended runway center lines. That's another one accessed from the settings menu up here. Extended center lines. Turn that on, and what it's going to do is show this extended runway center lines, not for every airport, but for my departure and destination airport. So here you are at Oshkosh. Just another visual aid to help me find the runway and line up on it and fly the right pattern. A very handy feature. You can even go a step further and use something called Traffic Pattern Advisor. And this is where ForeFlight will actually draw the traffic pattern entry. To do that, we'll go up here again to our Navlog, tap Edit, and we're going to go through this whole screen on our IFR scenario. But for now, let's just look at the Procedure button. Tap Procedure, and for my destination here, it's going to suggest either show a plate or a traffic pattern. Tap Traffic Pattern, and it's going to say which runway. Well, don't think. ForeFlight's going to tell you which one. 36 has the best wind, so really takes a lot of the decision making out of it. Tap on runway 36, and then it's going to ask, how do you want to enter? Straight in, 45, is it left traffic, is it right traffic? Again, ForeFlight's going to try to help you out here and suggest some. So let's say, just for demonstration purposes, we'll pick a right traffic 45-degree entry. Tap on that, and what you see here is that ForeFlight has actually drawn the traffic pattern to fly. I'm going to come in here, enter on a 45 leg to downwind to base to final. So great tools as a VFR pilot. If you're going to an unfamiliar airport and you're trying to get lined up and fly a good pattern, use those runway extended center lines and use those traffic pattern advisors. All right, so that's a look at a VFR scenario, planning it with airports and maps and imagery and file and brief, and then flying it on this maps page, making use of the HUD, making use of the obstacles, making use of the Navlog. That's sort of a typical flight, what we might use on VFR. What we'll do now is we'll jump into an IFR scenario and show a couple of the other features in ForeFlight and some of the ones that are particularly suited for an IFR pilot. So for this one, let's go back to our example of we're going to go from Atlanta to San Francisco. So for that one, let's start again at airports. I want to find out about my destination. So I'll type in KSFO and search. Brings up my airport here. Again, we talked about a lot of these features. For instrument pilots, though, we'll point out here's where you could find your approach charts for departure, arrival, and approaches. But there's another row of buttons at the top here I wanted to show you that can come in handy. Here's where, in particular, if you're going to a busy airport, you can find out FBO information. So tap on FBOs, and you'll get a view of the different FBOs at that airport. This is also where you find fuel prices. So tap on the FBOs tab to find out the fuel. These are updated pretty regularly by pilots like you, and I've found it to be pretty accurate. Here's Here's a pretty egregious example at SFO. You're going to pay over $8.40 a gallon for avgas, but it's nice to at least know that. I can tap on that FBO for even more information. Tell me about the features of it. I can get a photo of it so I know what it looks like. This sounds simple, but which FBO do I taxi up to? Well, here's a picture of the building. And then also comments. So you can have comments for an FBO here. But then this is how you'd find your fuel price. You can also look at comments for the airport. And this is what I find most valuable really is if I tap comments, remarks is just sort of general information from the FAA. Comments is you can think of this as pilot reports from other pilots. These are comments submitted by ForeFlight pilots. So I always like to review this. Sometimes you'll find some really interesting tips. For example, I think Oshkosh has a good tip here. Yeah, Orion is now Air Oshkosh. Sometimes you'll see erroring frequency in here. Here's the guy that didn't like the landing fee. Regardless, if you're going to an unfamiliar airport here, check out the FBOs tab, check out the comments tab. A lot of information there so that you know what you're getting into. I'll show you another tip here. So I'm back on Oshkosh, but I want to go back to San Francisco, and I'm lazy because I'm an iPad pilot, and I don't want to type in KSFO again. Well, I can tap this little clock button. That means recents. So I have favorites and recents. Favorites are down the left side here. Recents are what have I searched for recently. So recently, there's San Francisco. Just saves me some entry. So that's my airport page. Again, we covered most of this for VFR, but same information is valuable for an IFR pilot, particularly that weather feature there. So we check that out. Next, we're going to go to the maps page, just like we did on VFR. But what I want to show you here is this edit box. So if you remember on the VFR scenario, we created our flight plan in the search box. And that's great. That's a quick and dirty way to do it. You can do almost anything up there in the search box. For a little bit more powerful flight planning, I like to use this edit box. So I'm going to clear out our current flight plan in there. Tap clear and confirm. Then I'm going to go in here, simply tap and start typing. So again, I'll do KATL and then KSFO. And it's going to draw my course line. Did the same thing as it would have if I used the search box. The difference here is I can do some more powerful planning. First is that procedure button. We talked about that earlier. This is where we showed the traffic pattern. But for busy airports, this is also where you can load arrivals and departures. So let's say out of Atlanta, I know I'm going to fly a departure. So I'm going to do the Atlanta 6 departure with the noon transition. Instead of typing that in, instead of pulling out a chart and looking at all those intersections, I can simply tell it which one I'm going to fly, and it's loaded in there for me flight plan style. And then you'll see on the map that it has loaded in every last part of that departure. So a really handy way to do it. Likewise, I could put in an arrival into San Francisco. I'm going to fly the Golden 6 arrival and the FMG transition. So you see I have a very simple looking flight plan in here, but that's taking care of all of my departures and arrivals. So that's the procedure advisor. And you'll hear this advisor word a lot. ForeFlight has a couple different advisors in this edit view. Procedure is one of them. All right, well, that's great, but maybe I changed my mind. Well, I can do all kinds of editing right here. Let's say that I didn't really mean that Golden 6 arrival. Simply tap and hold, and I can drag it out of the way and it's gone. That's a quick and easy way to remove it. This is also a way to edit anything. I can tap and hold and rearrange the order. Maybe I want to do it this way. So a lot of flight planning within the actual box here. But in a way, we've put the cart before the horse here, because how do I even know I'm going to fly that departure? I've never flown this route before, so how do I know? So I'm going to tap and get rid of that. I'm back to just departure airport and destination airport. If I tap on the routes button here, this is the route advisor, and this is maybe the most handy pre-flight feature in ForeFlight to me. Tap on routes, and it's going to tell me the airway route to San Francisco, which is kind of interesting, but probably overkill. But more importantly, it's going to tell me the last few routes that air traffic control cleared pilots for. And that's what really counts, Because if I've never flown this route before, I don't know what to file. I'm pretty sure between Atlanta and San Francisco, I'm not going to get direct. But instead of going and searching, message boards or charts, let air traffic control tell you what they want anyway. Now, in this case, it's two airline airports, so I don't have anything low altitude. But you can see that ForeFlight tells you the altitude of these routes, so you know if something applies. I know that if I'm in a 172, this route probably doesn't make much sense. But let's pretend, just for the sake of argument today, that I'm in a Learjet, and so I might get one of these routes. I can search through these and say, that one makes sense to me. And I know it's reasonable because air traffic control cleared somebody there. Simply tap on it, and look, it's loaded the entire flight plan in here. So that route advisor here is a really handy feature. I encourage you to use that. You do need an internet connection to do that, so don't do that in the airplane. You want to do that ahead of time. But it's a great way to plan a flight, especially if it's an unfamiliar route or if it's a busy airport. So that's the procedure advisor, that's the route advisor. There's one more advisor, and that's the altitude advisor. If you go down here to the bottom left-hand corner, tap on that. ForeFlight, again, connected to the internet, is going to tell me the winds at different altitudes and then also compute my speed and fuel burn at each altitude. What it does is it gives me a glance at what's the best altitude for me to pick. I can optimize it for speed, time en route, or I can optimize it for fuel burn. It gives me a real good look at it. Today, not a whole lot of wind, so it doesn't matter a whole lot, but let's say I'll go up to 12,000 and take advantage of that tailwind instead of that headwind. Simply tap on it, hit close, and it makes that your active altitude. So combination of procedure advisor if you want to, but more likely route advisor and altitude advisor is a really good way to load a smart flight plan, much more than trying to figure it out on your own. Now the rest of these buttons around edit are pretty self-explanatory. Here's my airplane. So I told you to create an airplane earlier. This is where you would select one if you had multiple aircraft. Here we only have one, so it's easy. If I wanted to change my true airspeed, it's going to put my default in there for now. But if I wanted to change it, I could change it there. Fuel burn, again, I could put in a fuel burn there. And then estimated time of departure. This is handy if you're maybe planning the night before. So it's going to use right now the winds aloft for our current time. But let's say I'm doing it for tomorrow. Well, I could go in there and say, actually, it's tomorrow and it's an 8:45 a.m. What that's going to do is update my winds aloft forecast for that time period and give me a more realistic winds forecast and more realistic ETE. So that edit box, a lot going on there, but it's very, very powerful. And I really encourage you to check it out. Again, these top three will probably stay the same, but use that altitude advisor, use that route advisor, procedure advisor if you want to. Okay, so we've planned a flight. We've got a really good feeling about that. We're ready to file and brief. Well, we could go to file and brief here and create a new flight plan and go through and type all that in, but that's going to make us redo all that work. A better way to do it is to go back here to our edit box and this little arrow button here. That means send to. So we can send that flight plan we've created to a number of different places. We could print it, we could email it to somebody, I can copy it to a clipboard. But what I'm going to do here is send to file and brief. What that does is automatically creates a flight plan for me in the file and brief tab with all that information I entered. That's my departure airport, my time of departure, my route, my altitude. So my work is really done. I can simply send it to file and brief and I'm ready to go. Again, tap brief or tap file and I'm off and running. It's a big time saver. All right, so I skipped past plates and documents here. So we'll go back to plates. Again, this is a feature mostly for IFR pilots, but very, very powerful. And I think a lot of pilots don't use this feature to its full value. In short, this is a way to view your instrument approach plates and your arrivals and departures. There's a number of different ways to bring up a plate. Again, that search box is there. Feel free to use that. It's a smart search box though. So let's pull up KSFO and hit search. It's going to say, well, which one did you want? I have airport diagram, I have departure procedures, stars, and instrument approach procedures. I can tap on one of those and I'm viewing the approach chart. I can even get smarter in that search box. Let's say that I'm going to SFO and I know that I'm not going to fly. I know I want to fly in ILS. The weather is going to be bad, and so I know I'm going to fly in ILS. So I can type in KSFO and then ILS, and it will show me only the ILS approaches at San Francisco. automatically declutters. It's a really good way to, at a busy airport like San Francisco here, I can get rid of a lot of the junk I may not want. All right, so what's the difference between just tapping on it and that plus button? Well, tapping on it's what we just did, and that will bring it up full screen, and it's a way to view it. But what if I want to add multiple plates here? That's where I'd hit the plus. So I'm not sure if I'm going to get 28 left or 28 right. So whoops, I can tap on that plus button, and it will add it to my binder. And this concept of binders, again, is something I don't think a lot of pilots are taking advantage of. But instead of just pulling up random charts, I really like to create a binder. So let's walk through how that looks here. At the top of the screen, I have this My Plates. And if I tap that arrow, what I'll see is a list of binders. Right now, I don't have any. But let's make one for this trip. So I tap plus to create a new binder. We'll just call this simply SFO and save. Now I've got a place to store all my charts for that route. So it's a good way to stay organized. I like to actually create a separate binder up here for most of my trips. That way you don't have this mile-long list of 50 different plates. So here I can add all my plates for my Atlanta to San Francisco trip. I could search up here, which I just showed you, but another way to do it is just to simply tap Add Plate. And again, ForeFlight's smart here. It's going to try to guess what you want. And it says, well, which one do you want to add? You could certainly search for it up here, but you have San Francisco on your airports page. And in your File and Brief tab, you have these airports. And in your favorites, you have these. So it's a good way to shorten that process. So, yep, it's got airports. I did want San Francisco, and I want the airport diagram. And I also want, let's see here. I want that Golden Gate 6 arrival, and I want some approaches. So let's add in 28 left and 28 right. Click done. So now I've got a binder with my airport diagram, my arrival, and the two approaches I think I'll get. And it's nice and organized in this San Francisco binder. So you don't have to do this. You can just pull up plates one at a time if you want to. But to stay organized, I'd encourage you to make binders, at least maybe make them for the most common trips that you fly. Because then I can pull up an approach, brief an approach, I can close it, and I'm right back in my binder where everything I expected it to be. All right, we've got our plate set up. We've done our file and brief. If you want to get really crazy, you can even go into Scratchpad down here and copy your clearance in your Scratchpad. It's hard to do in the simulator here, but I do it from time to time. It actually works quite well. So let's assume that we're in the airplane. We've followed our flight plan. We've got our plates binder set up. We've got our route in mind. We've got our clearance copied. After takeoff, we get in the air and we're moving. Just like before, I recommend you bring up that nav log and you bring up the HUD display. In this case, let's turn on our IFR charts. Here's a feature, a scenario that comes up a lot, at least for me in instrument flying, that I didn't know how to do originally. And it'll be, let's say you're flying on a heading, you're on a vector, and air traffic control says, fly current heading, intercept the airway. How do you do that? Well, you don't want to go direct. Let's say we wanted to intercept this airway between Memphis and RZC. You don't want to hit direct RZC because he didn't clear you direct to that waypoint. He cleared you to fly this route, fly this airway connecting those two waypoints. The way to do that is to go up here and you find the leg, MEM to RZC, and you tap this little arrow button. And it says, do you want to go direct to RZC or fly the leg? Tap fly leg and it makes that the active route. So that's that scenario again. If air traffic control says fly this heading to intercept the airway, or resumo navigation intercept the airway, that's when you want to go up there to that nav log, find the right leg, tap the arrow. Very important feature because if you hit direct, you are not doing what air traffic control really wanted you to do. While we're in flight here, I'm not going to show off a lot of the Stratus features. Stratus would show you the weather, the METARs, TAFs, the radar. It would show you traffic from ADS-B equipped airplanes. One of the other neat features Stratus shows is attitude. It has a built-in attitude heading reference system. And what you can do there is turn on this other button we haven't used yet. Looks like an attitude indicator. Well, it is. You can bring up this split screen view. This is using Stratus's built-in attitude system and GPS. So what you see here are GPS data. That's 120 knots ground speed. It's not airspeed. and that's GPS altitude, vertical speed, and track. What's in the middle here is not GPS. That's actually an AHARS. That's real pitch and roll, updated about 5 times a second. So um, for an instrument pilot, this can be very, very helpful as a backup. Certainly not a primary instrument. This is not something you should be flying down to 200.5. But in the worst case scenario, we would not hesitate to use this. And that's how you turn it on. It's as simple as that. That feature works in portrait or landscape mode, and not necessarily have to fly along that way all the time, but you need to know how to get to it. It's a very, very handy feature if you're flying with the Stratus. We'll go back to our normal view here. Let's say we want to deviate around some weather. This is another great use for that rubber band flight planning system. So this is a nasty looking line of weather up here. Not sure I'm going to get around it. Take your course line, tap and hold, and drag all the way up here to get around that weather. Again, just pick a point in space if you want to, and we're going to actually get rid of that point and go up here. Create your own flight plan. I find IFR, this is actually very helpful, because instead of telling air traffic control, I need 15 degrees right or 20 degrees right, what you can do is say, I want to change my flight plan to this. That way they can put something in the computer and they know what to expect. Otherwise, they have to guess how long you're going to fly a certain heading. And in busy airspace, that can be less than ideal. So that rubber band flight planning is great for IFR pilots as well. I use it a lot around weather. Don't be afraid to just change your course, change your flight plan route. Some other features you can use deviating around weather that can come in handy are also in that settings menu. So if you go back up to settings, you can turn on distance rings, and you can turn on track vector. Distance rings you see pop up here. These are just gives you rings around your aircraft. These scale as you zoom in and out. Again, not something I'm sure you need to fly with on all the time, but I like this a lot in weather because it gives you a real-time look at how far am I. Again, if I were connected to Stratus and this was in-flight radar I'm looking at here, how far am I away from that cell? What's my clearance there? Do I have a good 25-mile buffer around some of this stuff? I like to fly with that on. Track vector tells you what it suggests, where you're going to be, and it draws a line out the front of your aircraft. This is also helpful for deviating or going around weather, because it gives you an idea of where am I actually going, what's my track, not my heading. Because if there's a pretty good crosswind up there at altitude, you can be looking right at something and not realize that it's actually not the direction you're tracking. Pilot reports also very valuable in flight. So for IFR pilots, icing, turbulence, I like to look at pilot reports for sure. Again, that's a layer. We can go up here, we'll turn on just world map for clarity, and turn on PIREPs. The value here of PIREPs is that I can look at them overlaid on top of radar. So we've all been on frequency when you hear the whole pilot report, 60 south and nowhere at this altitude, and he reports ice or turbulence, and you have no idea what that is. Well, now I know where that is, and I know that this guy who's going to report icing, I'm betting, let's see, he reports flight level 240, a King Air 350, occasional moderate chop and light icing. Well, does anybody have an idea why he might have moderate chop and light icing? He's flying through some pretty good looking weather there. So what I've found is that in IFR flying, the combination of all that information together is very, very valuable, because I get to do my route, I get to do a PIREP, I get to do radar all together. Much more valuable than just hearing that on the frequency. So in IFR flying, this is really how I fly. I fly with radar on and pilot reports on. How about the old direct to? So everybody wants to do direct to at some point in life. We showed how to activate a leg, but direct to can come in handy sometimes as well. There are actually 3 different ways to do it in ForeFlight. The first one is what we showed you. If I go up here, I can go direct, and instead of activating a leg here, it'll ask me to activate the leg. No, actually, I just want to go direct. So that's one way to go direct. Another way is up here in the search box. I can simply type in D and the waypoint I want to navigate direct to. So let's say I want to go direct to San Francisco because I got a great clearance up here. I'll go D space K S F O, direct to it. I could also tap and go direct to a waypoint. So tap and hold, hit more, and direct to. So lots of different ways to go direct to. They all pretty much do the same thing. They replace your current flight plan with a direct to. Um, just be aware of those if you get in that situation. All right, a couple more quick features, and then I want to wrap up and answer a couple of your questions. One is the hazard advisor. We haven't mentioned that yet. We talked about profile here, and we talked about obstacles, but there's another way to look at terrain. And if I go up here to my layers and turn on hazard advisor, this is a pro feature, that's going to give me a real TAWS style view, a terrain awareness warning system. So this uses my GPS altitude, and yellow means be alert, red means you're going to hit it. This is a really handy feature in mountainous terrain. Sort of my standard procedure here is to turn this on in descent. So hopefully at cruise altitude, we're not worried about hitting mountains. But as I start into descent, especially if it's hilly terrain, go up here and turn on hazard advisor, and it gives you a really clear look at what are going to be potential terrain threats and what aren't. You can see the resolution on this terrain is excellent. So it's a really handy feature if you're flying out west. And again, it's constantly updated based on your GPS altitude. So if you're a pro subscriber, use that hazard advisor. The one thing you'll note is you can't show radar and hazard advisor at the same time. It's just too confusing because you don't know if that red is red terrain or red radar. So you have to pick one or the other. So again, typically en route, I would look at radar en route and then turn on the hazard advisor in descent. A couple other quick things on plates. One is this plates on maps feature. I can overlay this approach plate on the moving map for kind of the ultimate situational awareness. There's that arrow button. Again, that's that send to feature. Well, here I want to send to map. What that does is overlays the plate right on top of my current plate. So here I could have a hazard advisor on and zoom in and see a georeferenced approach plate with my airplane flying right down it. It's really kind of the ultimate for an IFR pilot. I can even do things like adjust the opacity here. So I want to see a little bit of that base map bleeding through. I can go up here, tap on that settings menu on the top left corner of the plate, and you see I have sort of a transparent look. So that's that send plates to maps feature. It's a pro feature. Really neat. Again, if we're in mountainous terrain here, you could even see the red and yellow terrain of the hazard advisor showing through. It's really everything all in one. The last thing I like to tell people to set up, if you go in the More tab and settings, we haven't used it a lot because you really don't need this a lot. The settings are pretty well set the way the app comes. One thing I like to turn on though is to automatically show um, the runway diagram. So ForeFlight has a feature here called Auto Show Taxi. What that's going to do is it knows my ground speed because I have a GPS source. When I get below 40 knots and I'm at an airport, it's going to automatically go to a taxi diagram, and it's going to show my airplane on the taxi diagram. The advantage there is I just landed. It's a very busy time. Let's say in this example, I landed in San Francisco. I do not want to have my head down poking around the iPad when I'm just trying to clear the runway and get going the right direction. Well, here's a great time saver because I land, ForeFlight automatically pops up my taxi diagram, and I don't have to do anything, and I can just watch my airplane move along. So real quick, just go into More, Auto Show Taxi. Okay, so that's probably throwing a lot at you, and some of you may be kind of gasping for air there, but just wanted to give you kind of a feel of all the things that ForeFlight can do there. I want to finish with a couple quick closing thoughts and then get to a couple questions here. Most importantly, don't make this harder than it has to be. ForeFlight is supposed to be an easy to use app. Really, all these are. So don't try to outthink the app. In general, the app is pretty intuitive. Go with your gut, as it says there. What do you think you should do? More times than not, you're going to be right. And when in doubt, tap on it. As I said, you want more information about an airport? Tap it. You want more information about airspace? Tap it. Don't be afraid. You really can't break it. There's nothing you're going to do to this app that's going to fatally wound it. So don't be too afraid. Poke around with it. And as I put up at the top there, couch flying helps a lot. So you can learn an awful lot about this app sitting on your couch at home. You don't have to go flying necessarily. I really recommend you do some of that. And then finally, ForeFlight support is really quite good. So if you have a question, don't hesitate to email them, team@foreflight.com. They're pilots. They're there to help. They do a nice job walking you through features. Also, just a reminder on the ForeFlight video course, if you want to do some more self-study, goes into even more detail on some of these scenarios and some more advanced features we didn't get to. Check that out. iPad Pilot News has a lot of ForeFlight tips there. Some very, very handy things there you can find out. And what I'll do now is just in the remaining time, want to answer at least a couple of questions that have come in. So if you have any remaining ones, feel free to ask those. I'll try to get to as many as I can. All right. So the first question I have here is it possible to get runway extended lines of an airport and approach procedures while in flight without being on a pre-established route? Um, Not entirely sure the question there, because ForeFlight does not let you load an approach procedure in the flight plan. You can obviously view an approach plate, um, but you cannot load, say, the ILS 28 left approach. It won't show that up there. So yes, you can view runway extended center lines. You could put in waypoints overlaid on that runway extended center line, but you can't actually add an approach. Question here on the training course: how long is the subscription for the iPad training course? There is no expiration there. You buy it and you own it. So question here about why is it a bad idea to download all charts? And it's a good question. Certainly, it's not something you should stay away from if you want to. The reason I say it's a bad idea is that unless you're really going to be flying coast to coast, it takes up a lot of space on your iPad, and B, it takes a long time to download those charts. So it can take hours to download every chart in the US. If you're not going to use it, you're kind of wasting it. And if memory is short on your iPad, you can eat up easily 8 or 9 gigabytes of storage with all those charts. So it's just not a great way to do it unless you want to. Related question is there a way to remove past downloads? So this gentleman moves states and he's still being prompted to download his old state. Yes, the way to do that is go into that More tab and Downloads. And if you slide from right to left on the chart you want to delete, you'll see a little delete button pop up and you can tap that to get rid of it. So if you downloaded the state by accident and you didn't mean to, swipe from right to left and you can delete it. Question here about, do you have to have Wi-Fi for weather and runway wind, or can you use the Stratus? You can use the Stratus. Stratus includes winds aloft and surface winds through the METARs. So all those wind features, ForeFlight doesn't really care if it's getting wind information from the internet or if it's getting wind information from Stratus. It's the same. You'll see those same METAR symbols. You'll see it in the airports. You'll see it in the airports view. Question here about the green dots that were in the middle of the circle on the map there. Those are the METAR symbols. So green is VFR, blue is marginal VFR, red is IFR, and pink is low IFR. Those are just the standard weather symbols that give you an at-a-glance look at what the weather conditions are. Question here about if you select auto center and change between track up and north up, do you need to hit the crosshair again? No, you usually don't. If the auto center mode is on, the crosshair is enabled, you can switch back and forth between north up and track up quite quickly. Okay, I got time for one more question here, and then we're going to have to call tonight. When are charts updated? When charts are updated, are those in your binder updated? Great question. We get this a lot. The idea is if I create a chart binder and I download new charts, do I have to go back in and build my binder again? And the answer is no. When you update your charts in ForeFlight, it updates all those charts, including in the binder. So that's really one of the beauties of ForeFlight and the iPad is you go hit that download button and update your charts, walk away, drink a cup of coffee. When you come back, it's done. It really makes updating charts easier than ever. So no worries about that. Okay, we're out of time. I certainly want to thank you for attending. Thank you for your attention. Again, a recording of this webinar will be available in a couple days. I know we move very fast, so if you want to review it, check back for that link at sportys.com/webinars. If you have any other questions, feel free to send those my way. And again, thanks for being here. Good night.